Sunday dinner at my parents' house always felt like stepping back in time. The same floral tablecloth, the same mismatched chairs around their oak dining table in suburban Denver. I was cutting into Mom's famous pot roast when Dad casually asked, "So, Justin, how much has the money helped with your rent situation?" My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What money?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Dad's face went completely pale, like he'd just realized he'd said something terrible. Mom's water glass slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor and sending liquid spreading across the tablecloth. I turned to stare at my mother, watching her face crumble as she realized her secret had been exposed. The silence that followed felt like it stretched for hours. Mom was on her knees, frantically dabbing at the spilled water with her napkin, avoiding my eyes. Dad sat frozen, his own fork suspended in midair, staring between Mom and me, like he was watching a tennis match. "Sarah." Dad finally said, his voice quiet and controlled in that way that meant he was really upset. "What money are you talking about?" Mom's hands were shaking as she gathered the wet napkins. "Tom, I can explain." "Explain what?" I demanded, pushing back from the table. "What money, Mom?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes already filling with tears. "Justin, honey, I've been helping you out a little bit, just to make sure you're okay." "Helping me out? How?" My stomach was starting to twist into knots. I'd been struggling with my freelance graphic design work for months, but I'd been managing. Barely, but managing. "I've been putting some money in your account," she whispered. "Not much. Just $300 a month. Since Christmas." 8 months. I did the quick math in my head. $2,400. Money I'd thought was coming from better budgeting, from finally getting my act together financially. Dad's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as he stood up. "You've been doing what—" "Tom, please sit down." Mom's voice was getting higher, more desperate. Justin needed help, and I couldn't just watch him struggle. "But he didn't ask for help," Dad said, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. "And you didn't ask me." I felt like the room was spinning. Every time I'd felt proud of myself for making rent, for having enough left over for groceries, for thinking I was finally becoming a real adult, it had been a lie. Mom had been playing puppet master with my bank account. "How?" I asked, my voice coming out hoarse. "How have you been putting money in my account?" Mom finally stood up, wrapping the wet napkins in her hands like a security blanket. "I have your account information from when you were in college. I never took it off my phone banking app." The violation hit me like a physical blow. She'd been monitoring my account, seeing every purchase, every struggle, every small victory. "Mom, that's not legal. You can't just put money in someone's account without telling them." "I was helping you." She burst out, tears streaming down her face now. "I could see how hard things were for you. All those posts on Facebook about simple living and finding joy in small things. I knew you were just trying to put a brave face on it." My social media posts. I'd been trying to stay positive during a rough financial patch, posting about hiking and cooking at home and being grateful for what I had. She'd interpreted my attempts at optimism as coded cries for help. "Sarah," Dad said, and his voice was different now, colder. "Where did this money come from?" "Our savings," she said quietly. "Which savings?" The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know, even before she whispered, "The emergency fund." Dad sat down heavily, putting his head in his hands. "The emergency fund we've been building for 15 years. The one for our retirement." "It's not gone," Mom said quickly. "It's just, we can rebuild it." I felt sick, actually nauseous. My parents had been draining their retirement savings to prop up their adult son, who thought he was finally getting his life together. "This is insane," I said, standing up so fast, my chair tipped backward. "This is absolutely insane. I never asked for help. I've been doing fine." "Fine," Mom's voice cracked. "Justin, you were eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights in a row last month. I saw the pictures." "Those pictures." I'd been experimenting with different ways to make cheap food interesting, posting them as cooking challenges. She'd seen them as evidence of poverty. And you decided what that I was incompetent, that I couldn't handle my own life, that you're my son, and I love you, and I couldn't watch you struggle when I had the power to help. But you didn't help me, I shouted. You helped some imaginary version of me that exists in your head. The real me has been working my butt off thinking I was finally making progress, finally becoming independent. And it was all fake. Dad looked up at me, his face gray. How much, Sarah? How much of our emergency fund is gone? $6,000, she whispered. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. $6,000. Their emergency fund that I knew they'd been building slowly, carefully for years. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. I can't do this right now. Justin, please, Mom called after me as I headed for the door. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said without turning around. You stole from your own retirement to fix a problem that didn't exist. I was in my car and halfway home before I realized my hands were shaking. I pulled over at a gas station and opened my banking app, scrolling back through 8 months of transactions. There they were, regular as clockwork. Deposits every month, $300 each, always on the 15th. Always labeled as transfer from external account. I'd never questioned them. I'd assumed they were delayed payments from clients, or maybe corrections from the bank. I'd been so focused on trying to make my freelance business work that I hadn't paid close enough attention to exactly where money was coming from. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda, my girlfriend of 6 months. Still on for dinner tomorrow night. That new Thai place. I stared at the text for a long moment. Amanda didn't know how tight things had been for me financially. I'd been careful to plan cheap dates to always suggest splitting bills to keep her from seeing how close to the edge I'd been living. Or thought I'd been living. Now I didn't even know what was real anymore. I spent the entire night staring at my bank statements tracing every transaction back 8 months. The pattern was undeniable. Every month on the 15th, $300 appeared in my account from T&S Holdings. Tom and Sarah. My parents. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to know exactly how deep this went. The First National Bank branch where I'd had my account since college was a 15-minute drive from my apartment. I'd been there maybe 3 times in the past 5 years, usually preferring to handle everything online. But this required a face-to-face conversation. Mr. Coleman. The branch manager, a woman in her 40s named Patricia Mills, greeted me with the professional smile of someone who dealt with financial drama daily. How can I help you today? I need a complete history of all deposits into my checking account for the past year, I said, sliding my ID across her desk. Specifically, I need to know the source of some transfers I've been receiving. She typed on her computer for several minutes, occasionally glancing up at me with the kind of look that suggested she'd seen this movie before. Here we go, she said, turning her monitor toward me. These deposits you're asking about, they're coming from a joint account registered under Thomas and Sarah Coleman. The account name is listed as T&S Holdings, which appears to be how they've set up their main checking account. Can you tell me anything else about those transactions? When they were set up, how they were authorized? Patricia clicked through several screens. The recurring transfer was established on December 23rd of last year. It looks like it was set up through online banking using your account information. The account holder would have needed your full account number and routing information to establish the transfer. Information they'd had from when I was in college, and they were helping me manage my student account. Information I'd never asked them to remove from their banking system. Is this legal? I asked. Patricia's expression became carefully neutral. If the account holder had authorized access to your account information, and if you're listed as an authorized user on their account, then yes, it would be legal. However, if you didn't consent to these transfers, you could potentially file a complaint. I'm not looking to file a complaint, I said quickly. I just need to understand the situation. Would you like me to print out the transaction history for you? 45 minutes later, I was sitting in my parents' driveway with a complete printout of every deposit they'd made into my account. 8 months of $300 transfers, all coming from their primary checking account. Their retirement fund wasn't just being depleted. It was being systematically drained to support their son, who thought he was finally learning to stand on his own 2 feet. I found them in the kitchen. Dad was reading the newspaper with the kind of intense focus people use when they're avoiding conversation. Mom was washing dishes that were already clean. "We need to talk," I said, setting the bank printout on the kitchen table. Mom's shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. Dad folded his newspaper and looked at me with the wary expression of a man who'd spent all night having a difficult conversation with his wife. "Justin," he started, "your mother explained everything to me last night." "Did she explain this?" I spread the printout across the table. 8 months of transfers, $2,400 total, all coming from your main checking account. Dad picked up the papers, scanning the dates and amounts. His face grew paler with each line. "Sarah," he said quietly, "come look at this." Mom finally turned around, her eyes red from crying. She looked at the printout, like it was a medical diagnosis she didn't want to hear. "I know how it looks," she said. "But Justin, you have to understand. I was so worried about you." "You were worried about Instagram posts," I said. "You were worried about your interpretation of my social media. Did you ever actually ask me how I was doing financially?" She sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "You're so proud, Justin. You never asked for help with anything. Not since you were little. Because I didn't need help. But you were posting about living on $10 a week for groceries, about finding happiness in simplicity, about learning to appreciate the small things." Her voice was getting higher again. "Those aren't the posts of someone who's doing well financially." I stared at her. "Those are the posts of someone who's trying to stay positive while building a business. Someone who's learning to be grateful for what they have, instead of constantly wanting more." "I know that now," Dad said quietly. "But at the time it looked different. At the time you should have talked to me instead of going behind my back." I picked up one of the bank statements. "Do you know what this money has cost you?" Dad and Mom exchanged a look that told me they hadn't fully calculated the damage. "It's not just the $2,400, I continued. "It's the opportunity cost. This money could have been earning interest in your retirement fund. It could have been invested. Instead, it's been subsidizing my life based on a misunderstanding." "We can rebuild the retirement fund," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Can you?" I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Because according to this, you've got about $800 left in your main checking account. And according to the mail I saw on your kitchen counter yesterday, you've got a mortgage payment due next week." The silence that followed was answer enough. "How bad is it?" I asked. "How bad are things really?" Dad ran his hands through his hair, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "We're managing." "That's not an answer." "We're behind on a couple of bills," Mom admitted, "but nothing we can't handle." "Which bills?" Another long pause. "The mortgage," Dad said finally. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage." The words hit me like a physical blow. My parents were facing foreclosure because they'd been secretly supporting their adult son who didn't need support. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because it wasn't your problem to solve," Dad said. "Because we're the parents, and you're the child, and parents take care of children, not the other way around." "I'm 28 years old, I'm not a child." "You'll always be our child," Mom said, reaching across the table toward my hand. I pulled it back. "This is insane," I said, standing up. "You're going to lose your house because you were trying to save me from a problem I didn't have." My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Looking forward to dinner tonight. Should I pick you up at 7? I looked at the message then, at my parents sitting at their kitchen table surrounded by evidence of their financial sacrifice. Amanda didn't know about any of this. She thought I was a successful freelance designer who had his life together. Which apparently I wasn't. Not if my stability depended on my parents draining their retirement fund. I have to go, I said, gathering up the bank statements. Justin, Mom called as I headed for the door. We can figure this out together. There is no together, I said. There's just me trying to clean up the mess that you made by trying to clean up a mess that didn't exist. I was back in my car, gripping the steering wheel, when I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my life for the past 8 months had been built on a lie. And now, I had to figure out what was real and what wasn't. Starting with whether I could afford to take my girlfriend to dinner. I couldn't bring myself to go home, so I drove around Denver for 2 hours, trying to process what I'd learned. When I finally worked up the courage to face my parents again, I found them in the middle of the biggest fight I'd ever witnessed. I could hear Dad's voice from the driveway. 15 years, Sarah. 15 years we've been building that retirement fund. I know how long it's been. Mom's voice came back high and defensive. I know exactly how long it's been. I stood on their front porch for a moment, key in hand, debating whether to walk away. But I needed answers, and they needed to face what they'd done. The fighting stopped the moment I walked through the door. Justin. Mom said, her face flushed and her hair disheveled. I didn't hear you come in. Dad was standing by the kitchen island, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. We were just discussing the situation. Discussing. I looked between them. It sounded more like World War III. Your father thinks I've destroyed our marriage, Mom said, her voice brittle. Have you? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Dad turned away from both of us, staring out the kitchen window at the backyard he'd spent 20 years landscaping. This isn't the first time, he said quietly, not turning around. What do you mean? Your mother has a history of making financial decisions without consulting me. Mom's face went white. Tom, that's not fair. Isn't it? Dad finally turned back to us. What about when you bought Justin that laptop for college? The one we couldn't afford? What about when you signed him up for those art classes in high school without checking our budget first? Those were investments in our son's future, Mom said. Those were decisions you made unilaterally, just like this one. I felt like I was watching my parents' marriage unravel in real time. How long have you two been fighting about money? We don't fight about money, Mom said quickly. We have different approaches to financial planning. Different approaches. Dad laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sarah's approach is to spend money we don't have on things she thinks people need, whether they ask for them or not. And Tom's approach is to hoard every penny until we're too old to enjoy anything, Mom shot back. I'm trying to make sure we have enough money to retire someday. Or at least, I was before you gave away our emergency fund. I didn't give it away. I invested it in our son. Our son who didn't want it and didn't need it. They were talking about me like I wasn't standing right there. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person. Stop, I said. Both of you just stop. They turned to look at me, and I could see 25 years of marriage strain written across both their faces. How long have you been seeing a marriage counselor? I asked. Mom's face crumpled. How did you know? Because I found the pamphlets in your purse when I was looking for tissues yesterday. And because you two are fighting like people who've been in therapy long enough to know exactly what buttons to push. Dad sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Your mother has been going to counseling for 3 months. I've been twice. Just twice. I don't see the point in paying someone to tell us what we already know. Which is what? Dad looked at Mom, then back at me. That we have fundamentally different ideas about money, about boundaries, about what it means to be a parent. Mom was crying again, but quietly this time. I've been trying to save our marriage, Justin. The counselor said I needed to work on my self-worth, on feeling valuable as a wife and mother. So you decided to prove your worth by secretly supporting me. I decided to prove my worth by taking care of the people I love. Even if it destroys your marriage. I thought I was saving everyone, she whispered. Dad reached into his back pocket and pulled out a business card. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, he said, sliding it across the table to me. It was a lawyer's business card. Family law. Divorce attorney. Dad, no. I can't live with someone I don't trust, Justin. And I can't trust someone who makes major financial decisions without talking to me. Mom grabbed the business card and tore it in half. You're not divorcing me over this. It's not about this, Dad said. It's about the pattern. It's about 25 years of you deciding what's best for everyone without asking anyone what they actually want. My phone buzzed with another text from Amanda. Hey, you've been quiet today. Everything okay for tonight? I looked at my parents at the torn business card on the table, at the evidence of their failing marriage scattered around their kitchen. I have to cancel my dinner plans. I said more to myself than to them. Why, Mom asked. Because I can't afford them. The words came out harder than I intended. I can't afford dinner out because I don't actually know how much money I have. I don't know what's mine and what's yours. I don't know if my rent money for next month is real or if it's coming from your retirement fund. The money I put in your account is yours now, Mom said. You don't have to pay it back. That's not the point. I pulled out my phone and started typing a message to Amanda. The point is that I've been living a lie for 8 months, and I need to figure out what's real before I can move forward with anything. I sent the text, I'm really sorry, but I need to cancel tonight. Family emergency. Can I explain tomorrow? Her response came back immediately. Of course. Is everyone okay? Was everyone okay? I looked around the kitchen at my parents who were avoiding eye contact with each other at the torn lawyer's business card, at the bank statements still scattered across the table. No, I typed back, but they will be. I hope. Amanda's response came back within minutes. Do you need anything I can come over? I stared at her offer, realizing how much I wanted to say yes. Amanda represented normalcy, stability, a life where money appeared in bank accounts because I'd earned it, not because someone was secretly trying to rescue me. But I also knew that until I understood the full scope of what was happening with my parents, I couldn't drag her into this mess. I'm okay for now, I typed back. Just need to sort some family stuff out. I'll call you tomorrow. When I looked up from my phone, Mom was gathering the torn pieces of the lawyer's business card. Where are you going with that? Dad asked. I'm throwing it away, she said firmly. Because you're not calling any divorce lawyers. Sarah, you can't just pretend this didn't happen. I'm not pretending anything didn't happen. I'm trying to fix what I broke. I watched them stare at each other across the kitchen table, and suddenly I knew there was more to this story. What aren't you telling me? I asked. They both turned to look at me with expressions that confirmed my suspicion. What do you mean? Mom asked, but her voice was too careful. I mean, what else is going on financially that I don't know about? Because people don't threaten divorce over $2,400 unless there's something bigger happening. Dad and Mom exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Tell him, Dad said quietly. Tom, maybe we should… Tell him, Sarah. He's an adult. He deserves to know what his trust fund has cost us. Trust fund. The word hit me like a slap. It wasn't a trust fund, Mom said quickly. Don't make it sound like that. Then what was it? Dad stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where a stack of mail was sitting next to the coffee maker. He rifled through it and pulled out an envelope that had been opened and refolded several times. This came last week, he said, handing it to me. It was from their mortgage company, a notice of foreclosure proceedings. They were 90 days behind on payments, and the bank was beginning the process of taking their house. Jesus, I whispered. It's not as bad as it looks, Mom said quickly. We can catch up. We just need a few more months. A few more months of what? You don't have any money left in your emergency fund. You've been sending it all to me. Dad pulled out another envelope. This one was from a credit card company. We've been charging some things, he admitted. Groceries, utilities, gas. Just to keep the mortgage money free for when we could catch up. I looked at the credit card statement. They owed $4,700 on a card that had been at 0 8 months ago. How much debt have you taken on to cover the money you were sending me? It's not your fault, Mom said. We made these decisions. How much? Dad pulled out a third envelope. Then a fourth, then a fifth. About $12,000, he said quietly, between the credit cards and a personal loan. I felt like the room was spinning. My parents had not only drained their emergency fund to secretly support me, but they'd gone into debt doing it. They were facing foreclosure and bankruptcy because they'd been trying to save me from financial problems I didn't have. Why didn't you just ask me if I needed help? Because you would have said no, Mom said. You're too proud to accept help from anyone. So instead, you decided to help me without my knowledge and destroy your own financial stability in the process. We were trying to be good parents, she said, her voice breaking. Good parents communicate with their children. Good parents don't make unilateral decisions that affect everyone in the family. My phone rang. Amanda's name appeared on the screen. I should take this, I said, stepping into the living room. Hey! Amanda's voice was warm and concerned. I know you said family emergency, but I wanted to check on you. You sounded really stressed in your text. It's complicated, I said, sinking into my parents' couch. The same couch where I'd spent countless hours as a kid watching cartoons and feeling safe and loved. Now it felt like evidence of everything that was falling apart. Do you want to talk about it? I looked back toward the kitchen where I could hear my parents speaking in low, tense voices. My parents have been secretly putting money in my bank account for 8 months, I said. Money they couldn't afford to give. And I just found out they're about to lose their house because of it. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Amanda! I'm here, she said finally. I'm just processing. They've been giving you money without telling you? $300 a month. They thought I was struggling financially based on my social media posts. But you haven't been struggling. You've been doing great. You just got that big client referral last month. The big client referral. I'd been so proud of that. A former client had recommended me to a tech startup that needed a complete brand redesign. It was the biggest project I'd ever landed, and I'd seen it as proof that my business was finally taking off. Amanda, I said slowly, when did that referral come through? 2 weeks ago, maybe you called me right after the meeting. Remember, you were so excited. 2 weeks ago. After 8 months of thinking I was barely surviving financially, I'd finally landed the kind of project that would make my business sustainable. Ironically, right around the time I'd discovered that my financial survival had been subsidized all along. I have to go, I said. But can I call you tomorrow? I think I'm going to need to talk through this with someone who's not emotionally invested in the situation. Of course. Justin, I'm really sorry this is happening. But you'll figure it out. You always do. After I hung up, I sat on the couch for a few minutes, listening to my parents argue in the kitchen. They were trying to keep their voices down, but the house wasn't that big. This is exactly what I was talking about in counseling, Mom was saying. You make me feel like everything I do is wrong. Because when you make decisions that affect our entire family without consulting anyone, they usually are wrong. I was trying to help our son. You were trying to feel needed. There's a difference. That's not fair, Tom. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked Justin what he actually needed, instead of deciding for yourself? I realized Dad was right. Mom had been operating based on her own anxiety about my well-being, not on any actual evidence that I needed help. She'd been trying to manage her own fears about being a good mother by secretly managing my finances. I walked back into the kitchen. I need to ask you both something, and I need honest answers. They stopped arguing and looked at me. Did you talk to anyone else about giving me money? Did you get advice from family or friends? Mom's face flushed. I talked to your Aunt Lisa. My Aunt Lisa, who's been divorced 3 times and who thinks every problem can be solved by throwing money at it. She was concerned about you too. She saw the same posts I did, and she agreed that you seemed to be struggling. So this wasn't just you worrying about me. This was you and Aunt Lisa creating a whole narrative about my life based on Instagram posts. We were trying to be supportive. You were trying to be controlling. Dad nodded. That's what the counselor told your mother. That she uses money to try to control situations instead of communicating about them. Is that true? I asked Mom directly. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. Maybe, she said finally. The counselor says I have anxiety about being needed, about being valuable to the people I love. And maybe I do use money to try to prove my love, instead of just saying it. It was the most honest thing she'd said since this whole mess started. Mom, I said gently, I've never doubted that you love me. But I need you to trust me to manage my own life, even if it means I struggle sometimes. But watching you struggle is so hard. Struggling is part of growing up. You can't protect me from every difficulty, and you shouldn't try to. I know, she whispered. I know that in my head. But in my heart, you're still my little boy. I looked around the kitchen at the foreclosure, noticed the credit card statements, the evidence of 8 months of financial decisions made in secret. Well, your little boy is going to figure out how to fix this mess, I said. Because that's what adults do. I spent the next 3 days analyzing every aspect of my parents' financial situation. What I discovered was both worse and better than I'd expected. Worse, because the full scope of their debt was staggering. In addition to the foreclosure proceedings and credit card debt they'd borrowed against their life insurance policy and taken a personal loan from their bank. The total amount they'd spent trying to support me was closer to $30,000 when you factored in interest and fees. Better because my new client project was worth exactly $26,000 over 6 months. I was sitting in my apartment Wednesday evening, spreadsheets open on my laptop, when Amanda knocked on my door. You look like you've been hit by a truck, she said, taking in my appearance. When's the last time you showered? Yesterday. Maybe the day before. I'd been living on coffee and takeout, trying to figure out a way to save my parents' house and their marriage. Okay, first things first. Amanda walked to my bathroom and turned on the shower. Go clean yourself up. Then we're going to sit down and you're going to tell me everything. 20 minutes later, I felt almost human again. Amanda had ordered Chinese food and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Talk, she said, handing me a glass. I told her everything. The secret money transfers, the foreclosure notice, the credit card debt, my parents' marriage problems, the whole mess. Amanda listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me get it all out. So what's your plan? She asked when I finished. My plan? You've spent 3 days analyzing this situation. You're the most methodical person I know. You must have a plan. I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd been working on. The tech startup project pays $26,000 over 6 months. If I live on absolutely nothing but ramen and rice for the next 6 months, I can save about $22,000 of that. That's not enough to cover what they've spent. No, but it's enough to catch up their mortgage payments and get them out of immediate foreclosure danger. The credit card debt we can tackle over time. Amanda studied my spreadsheet. This plan has you living on $4,000 for 6 months. That's not sustainable, Justin. It's temporary. It's punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. I looked up at her. Wasn't it they were trying to help me? The money was meant for me. The money was meant for a version of you that existed in your mother's imagination. The real you didn't need help. She was right. But that didn't change the fact that my parents were facing foreclosure because of me, even if their reasons were based on a misunderstanding. I can't just let them lose their house. You're not letting them do anything. They made choices, adult choices, and now they need to face the consequences of those choices. The consequences include losing the house they've lived in for 20 years. Amanda closed the laptop. What if there was another way? Like what? What if instead of punishing yourself financially, you helped them learn to communicate better? What if you helped them fix their marriage instead of just fixing their money problems? I stared at her. How? I don't know yet, but I know that throwing money at this situation isn't going to address the real problem, which is that your parents don't know how to talk to each other or to you about important things. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Haven't heard from you in 3 days. Are you okay? I showed the text to Amanda. See, she said. She's doing it again. Instead of saying, I'm worried about you and I'd like to talk, she's checking to make sure you're okay, like you're a child who might have gotten lost. What should I say back? Say what you need, not what she wants to hear. I typed, I'm fine, but I need some space to think. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. The response came back immediately. Please don't shut us out. We can fix this together. There was that word again. Together. Like we were a team working toward a common goal, instead of 3 adults who needed to establish healthy boundaries with each other. I have an idea, Amanda said suddenly. What kind of idea? What if your parents think they're helping you with something real? What if they had a genuine way to support you that wouldn't involve secret money transfers? I looked at her. I don't follow. What if you needed their help with something legitimate? Something that would let them feel useful and needed without destroying their financial stability. Like what? Amanda grinned. Like starting a business that required family investment. Something where they could be actual partners instead of secret benefactors. The idea was so simple, I almost laughed. You mean trick them into working together to help me with something I don't actually need help with? I mean give them a way to channel their desire to help you into something constructive instead of destructive. I thought about it. My parents' biggest problem seemed to be that they made financial decisions without communicating with each other. What if I created a situation where they had to communicate, had to work together, had to be honest about their resources and limitations? That's either brilliant or completely insane, I said. Sometimes there's not much difference. I opened my laptop again and started a new spreadsheet. If I was going to do this, it would have to be convincing. They'd have to believe I really needed their help. What kind of business help could you realistically need? I thought about my freelance work, about the new client project, about the ways my business could actually grow if I had more resources. I could expand, hire other designers, rent office space, take on bigger projects that require a team instead of just me. How much would that cost? Realistically, about $30,000 to do it right. Office space equipment salaries for the first few months. Which happens to be almost exactly what they've spent trying to rescue you. Which means, if they invested in my business instead of secretly subsidizing my life, they'd get the same psychological satisfaction of helping me, but they'd be doing it openly and honestly. Amanda raised her wine glass. And if you structured it right, they could actually get their money back over time. Plus, they'd have to work together to make the investment decision. They'd have to communicate, plan, assess their finances honestly. It's like marriage counseling disguised as business planning. I looked at my spreadsheet, running numbers in my head. The tech startup project would provide enough cash flow to make a business expansion actually viable. And if my parents were invested in the business, instead of just giving me money, they'd be motivated to see it succeed, rather than just trying to manage my imagined failures. This could actually work, I said slowly. Or it could blow up spectacularly. What's the worst that could happen? Amanda laughed. Your parents could find out you manipulated them into saving their own marriage and financial stability. I can live with that. It took me 2 weeks to put together a business plan that was both convincing and realistic. Amanda helped me research office spaces, equipment costs, and salary projections for a small design firm. By the time I was done, I had a 30-page document that laid out exactly how Coleman Creative Solutions could expand from a one-person freelance operation to a full-service design agency. I also had a plan for saving my parents' marriage. I called them on a Saturday morning and asked if I could come over to discuss something important. Of course, Mom said, her voice immediately filled with worry. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. I just have a business opportunity I want to run by you and Dad. When I arrived at their house, they were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper spread between them. They looked like they'd been making an effort to act normal around each other, but the tension was still visible. "So, what's this business opportunity?" Dad asked, after I'd declined coffee and settled into my usual chair. I pulled out the business plan and set it on the table between them. "I've been thinking about expanding my freelance work into a real agency. The new tech client has been so happy with my work that they've referred me to 3 other companies. I'm at the point where I either need to start turning down work or hire help." Mom picked up the business plan and started flipping through it. "This looks very professional, Justin." "It should. I've been working on it for 2 weeks." Dad leaned over to look at the financial projections. $30,000 in startup costs. That's a significant investment. It is, which is why I wanted to talk to you both about it. They looked at each other, then back at me. "What exactly are you asking?" Dad said carefully. "I'm asking if you'd be interested in becoming silent partners in Coleman Creative Solutions. I can provide the expertise and the client relationships. You'd provide the startup capital. We'd split the profits according to investment percentages." The silence that followed was exactly what I'd hoped for. I could see them both thinking, processing, considering the implications. "How much would we need to invest?" Mom asked. "That depends on how much you're comfortable risking and what kind of return you're looking for." I pulled out a second document, a detailed breakdown of investment levels and projected returns. If you invested $15,000, you'd own about 30% of the company. Based on my client projections, that should generate about $3,000 to $4,000 in profit sharing over the first year, with growth potential after that. Dad studied the numbers. "What would you do with the other $15,000? "Small business loan from the bank. I've already talked to them about it. With your investment as collateral, I can get favorable terms." Mom and Dad exchanged another look, and I could see something I hadn't seen in weeks. They were communicating without words, the way married couples do when they're considering a major decision together. "Can we have some time to think about it?" Mom asked. "Of course. But I do need to know by the end of next week. The office space I'm looking at won't stay available long." "We'll need to assess our financial situation," Dad said. "Make sure we can afford to make this kind of investment." "Absolutely. In fact, I'd recommend you sit down together and go over your budget carefully. This needs to be a decision you both feel good about." After I left their house, I drove to Amanda's apartment. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think it worked. They're going to spend the next week talking to each other about money, probably for the first time in months. What if they can't afford to invest? Then they'll have to tell me the truth about their financial situation. Either way, they'll be communicating honestly instead of making unilateral decisions." My phone rang. It was Mom. "Justin, I just wanted to say how proud I am of you for thinking about expanding your business. It shows real maturity and planning." "Thanks, Mom. And I want you to know that Dad and I are going to give your proposal serious consideration. We think it could be a great opportunity for all of us." After I hung up, Amanda looked at me with raised eyebrows. "They're already talking about it as a team," I said. "Did you hear that Dad and I are going to give your proposal serious consideration? Not, I'm going to convince Dad, or Dad thinks we should. We." "Your plan is working." "My plan is terrifying. What if they actually want to invest, and I have to follow through with this?" Amanda laughed. "Then you'll have a successful business and parents who learn to communicate about money. Worst case scenario. Over the next week, my parents called me 3 times with questions about the business plan. Each time they called together with both of them on the phone, asking detailed questions about cash flow projections and market analysis. On Friday evening, they invited me over for dinner. "We've made a decision about your business proposal," Dad said as Mom served pot roast that actually tasted good for the first time in months. "We'd like to invest," Mom said, "but we have some conditions." My heart started pounding. "What kind of conditions?" "We want monthly financial reports," Dad said. "We want to understand exactly how the business is performing and where our investment is being used. We want to be involved in major decisions, Mom added. Not day-to-day operations, but anything that affects the overall direction of the company. And we want you to hire a bookkeeper, Dad continued. Someone independent who can help you manage the financial side of things professionally. I stared at them. These were exactly the kinds of oversight and accountability measures that would prevent the kind of secretive financial management that had gotten us into this mess in the first place. Those conditions are completely reasonable, I said. Good, Mom smiled. Because we can invest $12,000. $12,000. Not enough to cover all their debt, but enough to catch up their mortgage payments and stop the foreclosure proceedings. That's perfect, I said. With $12,000 from you and a small business loan for the rest, I can make this work. There's one more thing, Dad said. We want you to know that this investment comes from our remaining emergency fund. It's money we can afford to lose if the business doesn't work out. We're not going into debt to support this venture. We've learned our lesson about making financial commitments we can't afford, Mom added quietly. I looked at my parents sitting side by side at their kitchen table, presenting a united front for the first time since this whole mess started. Actually, I said, there's something I need to tell you both. They looked at me expectantly. The tech startup project I mentioned, it's real, and it's going well. Well enough that I think I could probably expand my business without any investment at all. Dad frowned. Then why did you ask us to invest? Because you needed a way to feel like you were helping me that didn't involve secrecy or financial sacrifice, and because you needed a reason to work together on something instead of making unilateral decisions that affected the whole family. The silence that followed was different from the angry silences of the past few weeks. This felt like understanding. You manipulated us, Mom said finally. I gave you an opportunity to be the parents you wanted to be in a way that didn't destroy your financial stability. Dad started laughing. He got us, Sarah. He got us good. Mom agreed, but she was smiling too. So what happens now? Dad asked. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. Now we figure out how to use your $12,000 to actually launch Coleman Creative Solutions. Because it turns out this fake business plan has convinced me that expanding my business is actually a pretty good idea. 6 months later, I was sitting in the office space I'd rented in downtown Denver, looking at the financial reports for Coleman Creative Solutions. We'd hired 2 junior designers and a part-time bookkeeper, exactly as I'd outlined in my original business plan. The tech startup project had led to 5 more clients, and we were booked solid through the end of the year. Mom and Dad's investment had been repaid in full, plus 15% profit sharing, exactly as promised. More importantly, their marriage had survived. The counselor says we're making real progress, Mom had told me the previous week. We're learning to talk about money before we make decisions instead of after. And your mother is learning to ask people what they need instead of deciding for them. Dad had added with a smile that held no resentment. Amanda walked into my office carrying 2 cups of coffee from the shop downstairs. Your parents are here, she said, handing me one of the cups. Already I thought the meeting wasn't until 3. It's 3:15. You've been staring at spreadsheets for 2 hours. I looked up to see Mom and Dad standing in my office doorway, both of them smiling. We brought celebration coffee, Mom said, holding up a bag from my favorite coffee roaster. Celebrating what? 6 months of successful business partnership, Dad said, and 6 months of no secret financial transactions in our family. Also, Mom added, 6 months of marriage counseling that's actually working. They settled into the chairs across from my desk, looking more relaxed and happy than I'd seen them in years. The counselor wants to meet with all 3 of us next week, Mom said, to talk about family boundaries and communication patterns. Are you okay with that? Dad asked. We don't want to pressure you into family therapy. I think it sounds like a good idea, I said. We could probably all use some help figuring out how to be a family of adults instead of parents and child. Amanda knocked on the doorframe. Sorry to interrupt, but Justin has a client call in 10 minutes. We'll get out of your hair, Mom said, standing up. But before we go, I wanted to say something. She looked at Dad, who nodded encouragingly. I want to apologize for not trusting you to manage your own life. And I want to thank you for finding a way to help us learn to trust each other again. And I want to apologize for threatening divorce instead of just talking to your mother about my concerns, Dad added. We both learned some things about communication over the past few months. After they left, Amanda sat down in the chair Mom had vacated. You know what I think is interesting about this whole story, she said. What's that? Your parents thought they were rescuing you, but you ended up rescuing them. From their own inability to talk to each other, from financial decisions made in isolation, from a marriage that was falling apart because of secrets. I thought about that as I prepared for my client call. Amanda was right. The money had been a symptom, not the real problem. The real problem had been a family that loved each other deeply, but had never learned to communicate openly about difficult things. You know what else is interesting, I said. What? I thought being independent meant not accepting help from anyone. But it actually means being strong enough to accept help when you need it, and wise enough to offer help when others need it. And brave enough to have honest conversations instead of making assumptions about what people need. My phone rang with the client call. Before you take that, Amanda said, I have something to tell you. What? My lease is up next month, and I was thinking about looking for a new place. Yeah. Maybe somewhere closer to downtown. Maybe somewhere with space for 2 people. I looked at her, this woman who'd stood by me through the messiest family crisis of my adult life, who'd helped me figure out how to save my parents' marriage without losing my own sense of independence. I think that sounds like a great idea, I said. Even if it means combining our finances, talking about money and budgets and all those adult things that are so complicated. Especially if it means that. I answered the client call feeling like I'd finally learned what it meant to be an adult. Not someone who never needed help, but someone who could ask for help when necessary and offer help when possible. Someone who could have difficult conversations instead of making assumptions. Someone who understood that love meant trusting people to handle their own lives while being available when they genuinely needed support. The tech startup client wanted to hire Coleman Creative Solutions for a year-long project worth $60,000. After I hung up, I called my parents. Good news, I said when they both got on the phone. What's that? Mom asked. Your investment in my business just got a lot more valuable. Even better news, Dad said. Your investment in our marriage just paid off too. Your mother and I have been talking about taking a real vacation for the first time in 10 years. Where are you thinking of going? Somewhere we've never been, Mom said. Somewhere we can plan together and experience together without any secret agendas or hidden concerns. That sounds perfect. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a few minutes, thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. My business was thriving. My parents' marriage was stronger than it had been in years. Amanda and I were moving in together, and most importantly, my family had learned to talk to each other honestly about the things that mattered. True independence, I'd learned, doesn't mean refusing all help. It means creating relationships where love flows both ways, built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. Family isn't about hiding struggles or secretly solving them. It's about facing life together with honesty and courage, supporting each other without controlling each other, and understanding that sometimes the best way to help someone is to trust them to help themselves. The money in my bank account was real now, earned through my own work, managed through my own decisions, shared with people I trusted to be honest about their own needs and limitations. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt like enough. Thank you for listening to my story about learning what family really means. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to help you in a way that didn't actually help? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and growing up, and share it with someone who might need to hear about the importance of honest communication in families. Remember, the strongest relationships aren't built on secrets or assumptions, but on trust, respect, and the courage to have difficult conversations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.